Good afternoon, everyone. One of the main moral of today's story is that sometimes it is in our defeats that we can find victory. Sometimes when we lose is a time when we win, strangely enough. A Greek leader once, by the name of Pyrrhus, he fought the Romans many times, and he won battle after battle after battle. But every time he lost an insane number of troops. And he once said, "One more victory like this, and I will be finished." So sometimes, when we think we lose, we actually win. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because sometimes in these great disasters, or the times when we lose, we fight so bravely and we inspire others to carry on the cause for which we are fighting. And that is the lesson that we will discuss today. In the early 1800s, many Americans were moving westward and southward into Texas. It was part of the frontier, the new land, a place where they could go and get a farm. They could grow and start a fresh new life. And thousands of Americans wanted to set up farms there, to create families there. However, Mexico, which by this point had gotten its independence, Mexico began to worry because none of these Americans were adopting any of Mexico's cultures or customs. They were coming in there as full-fledged Americans, and they were not adjusting to Mexico at all. So they started to get nervous. So in 1830, Mexico banned all immigration from Americans moving into the Texas area. This upset many people who lived there. This upset many Tejanos. Tejanos were sort of people who lived in Texas. This upset many Tejanos because they depended on trade with the U.S. to make money. And some Americans wanted Texas to be fully independent of Mexico. So this started to really create some tensions and some drama when Mexico banned U.S. immigration into Texas. And in the meantime, General Santa Anna took over Mexico and named himself a dictator. And he wiped out any constitutional protections for Texans, and especially any Mexicans coming to live there. So one of the major organizers to stand up against this, people who said that who stood up, did not like this change of policy, was a man by the name of Stephen Austin. And he was a major leader in Texas, and he said he organized his followers to defend themselves against Santa Anna and the Mexican government. So as you can see, tensions were raging in the 1830s. And in 1835, Santa Anna sent troops into Texas to actually crush this movement, to get rid of it, to wipe it out. And the Tejanos who fought won a couple of important victories. They, in fact, liberated San Antonio. Santa Anna, as you can imagine, was not very happy about that, and so he wanted to crush this rebellion. And he went to a nearby force of troops, and they were stationed. He found a group of American soldiers, and they were stationed at a little tiny pueblo, a little area called the Alamo. And he sent his troops to try and take over the Alamo. Now, the fighters in the pueblo had cannons, which was good, but they didn't have any gunpowder, which meant that they kind of couldn't really use the cannons. It's sort of like saying, "Hey, check this out! I got a new iPhone 5. It's really fine, really shiny, really fast, really cool. It has lots of apps, but there's no battery." That's the situation that the Americans found themselves in the Alamo. On top of that, they had 160 soldiers versus several hundred. Or not, what did I say, several hundred? Several thousand Mexican soldiers. So as you can imagine, the odds were in Santa Anna's favor. The American commander, William Travis, asked for more troops and assistance, but he did not receive that many. He received a few here and there. Now, they held out They held out. The battle began. They started fighting. They held out for 13 days. 13 days. Several thousand people versus 160, and yet they lasted 13 days. But then finally, on March 6th, 1836, Mexican cannon smashed through the Alamo walls, and in the end, Travis and several other big-name Americans, including Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie, died. All the Americans in the Alamo died. So this seems like a huge loss for the Americans. But several hundred Mexican soldiers did die in the battle, so the Americans did disproportionately kill a lot more than the Mexicans did to the American troops. And this became a very serious rallying cry, that people remembered this loss, the Alamo. This is what we're talking about, the idea that sometimes you fight so bravely and so gallantly that you inspire others to fight in the future. And it also delayed Mexico's troops. It gave the rest of the Americans who were living in Texas time to figure out what they were going to do. And in the meantime, they in fact drafted a new constitution. And they drafted that constitution in Washington on the Brazos. And their constitution was very similar to that written by the United States. And at the same time, Commander Sam Houston ordered his troops, about 900 troops in total, to a town called San Jacinto. There they found Santa Anna resting with his troops after the Battle of the Alamo. He decided, because of course there were still more Mexican troops than there were American troops, he decided to launch a surprise attack. And this is where this time they were inspired. As the Americans were fighting and doing the surprise attacking and they were going after the Mexican troops, they kept yelling into the air, "Remember the Alamo!" Whee! I don't know if they did that "whee" part, but they might have. I don't know. Anyways, the important thing is that they defeated the Mexican troops. They captured Santa Anna, and he signed a treaty on May 14th, 1836, officially recognizing Texas's independence. And at that point, Texas became known as the Lone Star Republic. And in fact, today it is known as the Lone Star State. It's also known as a place where you can get delicious barbecue food. And if you want to get something giant, like a Texas-sized cookie or a Texas-sized piece of food, then it is known as very, very big. Now, Texas at this point, even though it was its own republic, its own country, the Lone Star Republic, it did not want to be its own republic. It wanted to join the United States. And meaning the people running the government, people like Stephen Austin and his fellow politicians wanted it to be part of the United States. And it petitioned the United States to be admitted. But President Andrew Jackson at this point said no, because it would upset the balance in Congress. It would upset the balance between the slave states and the free states. It would tip the balance in the favor of having more slave states than free states. Therefore, Andrew Jackson rejected its petition to become part of the United States. John Tyler, who became president in 1841, he then tried to annex Texas, but he could not get enough votes in the House of Representatives to pass it. He couldn't get it through Congress. Now, finally, a few years later, December 29th, 1845, which is almost 10 years later, it took until 1845 for annexation to go through Congress under President James K. Polk, and then Texas finally became the 28th state. However, by this point, tensions between Mexico and the U.S. were very, very high. And they would rise again. So it turned out that the Alamo and Texas and all this story, remember the Alamo, was just one little chapter in the entire saga between the U.S. and Mexico in the mid-1800s. What would be the next thing? What would happen with tensions rising again? Would things get worse? That is a topic for another video. In the meantime, I wish you a good afternoon. I hope to see you tomorrow. And unless, of course, today is a Friday afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, or there's no school on Monday, or if this is the middle of a vacation, in which case, I will see you later.